Hello and welcome to the next episode of the SA Digital Marketing Podcast. My name is Terence Mentor and I'm a digital marketer who's realized that since this industry is constantly changing, we need to be constantly learning. And I think the best way to learn all of the things is to talk to the people who are doing all of the things. So this podcast is really just a chance to do just that. In this episode, we talk about brand marketing with Imke Dannhauser, who's currently working for Google, where her focus is on the brand marketing for search and Gemini in sub-Saharan Africa. Obviously, I wanted to know how someone goes about getting a job at Google, but we also discussed the complexity of bringing a product like generative AI into a market, the comparison between brand and performance marketing, and how you can know that it's time for a massive rebranding operation. As you can imagine, Imke has some deep insights on those topics and so much more, so let's get right into it.
My name is Imke. I work for Google as part of the Africa marketing team. I look after Google Gemini or Gemini and Google Search with a little bit of our policy team and AI storytelling around the continent as well. I'm based in Johannesburg. I am 4 business days away from a holiday. So really, I am very close to out of both business days and English in terms of bundle capacity.
So we caught you just at the cutting edge of the limits of your brain.
Right. If I evolved into interpretive dance, please understand that I've now just completely given up.
I was telling a friend of mine that at this point, I now feel like I'm about to get ready for 2024. I'm ready for 2024 in November of 2024. Maybe 2025 is a pipe dream right now, but I'm sure anyone who's listened has heard the word Google, and that's fired off, a million brain cells. In the neurons are firing for most people, and I'm sure you get this question immediately after you tell someone, "I work for Google." The first question is, how did you get a job at Google? What was that process like?
I was lucky enough to be referred by a Google colleague, but for most people, it is very much via the Google Careers website where all the positions are listed and you apply and register your CV there. Once recruiters kind of have screened your CV and, have decided that you are a match for the role, you get invited, because I am part of the general business functions, to a standardized interview process, which is 3 rounds of interviews where Google tests things like general cognitive ability, Googliness, which is really around culture fit, and your problem-solving ability. But I must say, the recruiting team are incredibly kind. The interviewers are really kind, and it's very much a conversation rather than you feeling on the spot. So, good process. Look, it was also 4 years ago, so it is relatively far in the rear view mirror.
Things maybe have changed. Because in my mind, I imagine just a room with a one-way mirror and a single light over a desk with people just throwing questions at you. I'm glad to hear it was a lot gentler than I guess what I have in my head is
it's like too, right? Like just add a bit of drama there.
Exactly. yeah, like metal chair that gets thrown against a wall at some point. I think I might be merging like a CIA interrogation with a Google interview. I think I've merged those two ideas.
A little bit too much procedural shows there, yes.
So it sounds like just a good version of what a interview process should be like, where you get to know the company gets to know you, and figuring out if it's a good fit for both parties. Is that generally a good way to describe it?
Yes.
Okay, so you've heard it. Yeah, if you want to get a job at Google, start with the link that'll be in the show notes. We will put a link to the Google job portal in the show notes. Okay, so we've got the Google question out the way. Hopefully at this point people are like, okay, I can keep listening now that we've tickled that part of the brain. Part of your job is focusing on Gemini, which is obviously the AI model that Google has been implementing over the last few years. What are the particular challenges that comes with bringing in a new technology, or at least branding a new technology like this to people who might be a little bit resistant? When you say the word AI, it comes with like a ton of baggage. How do you work through that, and what other challenges are there with marketing something like Gemini?
Look, a couple, and I don't think this is necessarily new to or unique from a marketing perspective only to generative AI, right? Like when they launched the automatic washing machine, Omo faced similar challenges in terms of user adoption. Specific to Gen AI and Gen AI across Africa, there are the obvious infrastructural challenges around, having affordable devices in hand, having the digital literacy levels required to be able to comfortably navigate tech like Gemini, and then having affordable data to be able to access it, right? So there's very much that. But I think the largest barrier to usage, and this is something that we see globally, is one of really finding your aha use case, for want of a better word. So if I use you as an example for a moment, Terence, you might absolutely love, describing kind of the people that join your podcast, right? Like, so the introduction piece of, meet my new guest, you might love, but thinking through the specific questions that you want to ask them might be something that you really, really don't enjoy. And so if you were stuck only trying to use Gemini or similar tools to describe your next guest, you'd say, well, this isn't super helpful to me. This is not something that I gain a lot of value from. However, if you say, well, look at this person's LinkedIn profile and suggest some questions, that might be a big unlock. Or here's the interview transcript, please give me a title for this episode. That might be a big unlock. I can see I'm giving you ideas for productivity here.
Already, I'm literally like, yes.
But it is really around discovering the one thing that adds a lot of value. And from there on, we see people starting to use Gemini or other Gen AI tools more frequently.
And it's interesting to say that because in one of the recent interviews with Matt, who we both know, it's a mutual I want to say friend of ours. Yeah, that's fine. He was saying that for his work as a fractional CMO, generative AI is crucial for him for like all of the slog work. So the creativity and the creation part of the marketing world and the people leadership part, that's up to him. But the reading through loads of text and getting a summary, thinking of this is the concept, can you expand on that? That stuff he hands over to AI, and it's enabled him to do his job just so much better. But like you say, it's because he's found those very specific use cases where it does make his life just so much easier. So does that mean that a lot of the marketing that you would be doing is kind of showing off those use cases, like giving an example of, hey, this is Terence, he's a podcaster, this is how he might use Gemini, and you're just creating those? Is that a lot of the work?
I mean, the short answer is yes, I suppose. It is very much around the storytelling, right? Bringing that to life to people. So it is not just around telling them, it is not in fact at all about telling people about, the terabytes of data underpinning this large language model. That is not incredibly engaging for the average user. It is around telling the stories and bringing to life the benefits that people are experiencing themselves by using it. I think Matt made a really good point, and this is something I heard the creative industry uses. They think about AI and how AI or Gen AI can supplement their work, right? They differentiate between high and low empathy tasks. And so low empathy tasks is generating the 96 different formats that you need to put a single ad on social media. That is something that you can automate. And so that's very much a productivity task. High empathy tasks, though, looking at a customer persona and really feeling the need that underpins that persona and identifying how your product can help meet that need, is very much something that AI can help supplement, can help kind of like be a thought partner on, but not necessarily something that we wanted to, be a replacement for people, just because of that empathy levels.
And I guess that helps with potentially some of the fear and backlash that kind of comes with new technology. We saw it with the introduction of the motor vehicle and all the horses that had to be, that's always the example that gets thrown around. But making it very clear where these tools are useful and where they're not useful. I guess from a marketing point of view, it helps when people are saying, oh, you're taking our jobs and robots are taking over everything. You're trying to make it very clear, like, no, this is just, it's a hammer, it's a spanner. Use it in the right way and it makes your life better. Have you found that that is something that you've had to do a lot of work around in trying to maybe more even the average user, someone who's maybe not that technically aware, they might be getting a lot of negative messaging about just the term AI in and of itself is scary. Have you had to fight a lot of that like negative fear-based messaging?
Look, and very hard to speak for an entire continent here, but certainly the research that we've seen says that in broad strokes, the African user is really excited and enthusiastic about the opportunities that Gen AI can offer. Very big understanding that yes, there's going to be some changes in the skills that I need to get the best out of it, but for the most part, super positive around the potential that this technology has. So no, I don't know if there's robots kind of like coming everywhere.
I mean, I have friends who have decided that everything they say online about AI, they're going to say something positive, because one day when the robots take over, they want to make sure that the robots know that we were always on their side. But that's, again, the kind of like fictional version of what is actually going on in the background. I got to tell you, I have to fight the urge to make this entire conversation about marketing generative AI, because I think that's fascinating, and that might have to be like a very specific conversation we have in the future. But you have a storied history in marketing. I know that makes you sound old. I don't mean it like that. You have a lot of experience in the industry, not just
old,
with.
So that's fine.
Okay. So you're happy with that as well. Both things can be true. I'm old without that much experience, so it works both ways. But before Google, you were working in a consultancy and specifically looking at how to transition brands. And I've been thinking a lot about when is it the right time for a big shakeup in branding and in the brand in totality, not just with the logo, but the messaging, the tone, who you're going for, the whole thing that comes with brand marketing. And I sometimes feel that when I see it happening in other companies and other businesses, sometimes it feels like they're doing it just for the sake of doing it, so that the heads of marketing can say, "Ooh, look at what we did this year. We did a whole rebrand." But then when you go, was that necessary? Really? So how, with that work that you've done with consulting to businesses, when would a business know now is time to change up this brand?
I was lucky enough to be part of the brand team that repositioned Carling Black Label, to the point that I'm old, a good 12 years ago. And I think there's a couple of things to call out here. The first is that with everything in you, resist the urge to constantly reposition your brand, right? Like that's maybe message number one, for a couple of reasons, but one is how incredibly expensive and time consuming this is. And if you think about it, it is not just the money around repositioning and testing your repositioning and re-establishing what that brand stands for in people's heads, which will take years. It is also what you're walking away from, the marketing investment that you had behind your previous positioning, and also just the loss of efficiency, right? So you've created memory structures, which means that when people see communication from that specific brand, they have a shortcut in their heads around what this is about. And you're walking away from that as well. So resist as much as you can. Message number one. Message number two is, well, we cannot resist. We absolutely have to do it. There, my expectation would be that you, as a good brand marketer, you're close to both your consumer and your brand health. Right? And from brand health, I would suggest you look at two main metrics. The first is your consumer funnel, which, depending on your industry, changes a little bit, but has a awareness, consideration, trial, and usage kind of like phase to it. What you'd see with a brand that is in dire need of repositioning is typically that you get losses in both your consideration part of the funnel as well as in your usage, which means practically that you're losing people currently using your brand, and there are very few new people coming in. And then, the next thing to do is then start looking at your brand attributes from a brand health point of view. And there I would see, or expect to see, the loss of emotional connection between your consumers and your brand. So you'll see things like decreases in, this is a brand that I trust, or a brand that I recommend, or this is a brand for me. You'll see losses there. That is, of course, only step one. That is the start of your hypothesis around I need to reposition, not license to reposition. That's where you start really interrogating your consumers to understand how they're thinking about the brand, what's changed, what hasn't changed, what's good, what's bad. And from there, eventually, a considered, board-approved decision to reposition.
So even just the process of thinking about repositioning is expensive in time and resources. So like just that initial phase in itself feels like that's quite intense. But let's say you've ticked all of those boxes. You've taken the year and a half or 2 years that it's taken you to get to that point where everyone right up and down the organization feels like this is appropriate. Is there a first big step in getting that repositioning going? Because I think the thing that we would see is a change of the logo, a change of the coloring, a change of that kind of like visible branding. I'm guessing that's not the first thing that happens with a repositioning.
Step one in your repositioning really is articulating what that new proposition is, right? And so welcome to Imke's school of belief around value propositions and brand ladders. But that is really step number one, is redefining what that looks like. And from there, well, understanding your implications across your marketing mix around the from to. What I would expect, and this again will depend a little bit on the category, but I would expect significant changes in your overall brand CI, and so that would be logo, look and feel, website, the more directly in control brand touch points, perhaps, is the way to think about those. And then a change in your brand communication as well. And so particularly if you think about your advertising more broadly, I'd expect to see changes there. What will take a little bit more time is things not as directly in your control. So, if you have like consumer goods, and particularly in the alcohol industry, a lot of trade presence, that will take a little bit longer to update. And again, depending on the category, packaging is a scary thing to change, right? And takes time and sensitivity. In beer, for example, which is a lot of where my experience around repositioning lies, consumers get really twitched, right? They're like, oh no, you've changed this product that
this
I love.
This feels different in my hand.
Suddenly I have a headache when I drink it. And so there's a lot of consideration there. Whereas, in other grocery categories, it is a lot more, new look, same taste. And everybody's like, great, that's fantastic. And so there's a lot of category sensitivity there as well that you really need to understand as you are choosing or sequencing your touch points and how you update those.
Because as a digital marketer, for me, the kind of big rebranding that needs to happen, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's like you say, changing a website, changing the social media feel, changing the messaging, the tone, and that kind of stuff, which it's all online. So you click a button and it happens. Okay, I've oversimplified it, but effectively that's what it is. To change the look and feel of a bottle also requires like a whole factory to be redone. There's a whole production line that has to be rethought of. And so I can imagine that if you are selling that physical product, that is a massive, massive call to make, which I'm assuming involves just loads of research and customer insights. Is that a big part of it, where you're sitting down with your customers and kind of giving them the new feel, the new look, and a lot of kind of testing and experimentation before you pull the lever?
For packaging changes in particular, and I will concede that this differs a little bit, again, depending on the size of the brand and, how comfortable consumers are with packaging upgrades. But if I think about Carling Black Label's packaging upgrade, we had multiple rounds of focus groups in multiple cities around, the concepts. And once we had concepts, we had quant testing, which was, for want of a better word, imagine a dummy liquor store, and people were tracked as they were shopping to understand the impact of our current versus preferred to packaging routes, to understand the potential impact. Because, it is, to your point, millions and millions of rands to write off the existing stock, get new packaging material in, put in the change parts, etc., etc. And so, you want to be sure before you do it, as sure as you can be.
Yeah. I mean, there's that famous story of old Coke and new Coke in the States where they brought in the new Coca-Cola and then all the testing said that, new Coke people loved, but they didn't really ask the right questions. And they discovered that people they just hated it. And they hated it because it was new, not because of the taste or of anything like that. So there are these examples of repositioning and rebranding that happens, throughout marketing's history where people have just got it massively wrong and cost loads of money. I must say, brand marketing as a function of marketing in and of itself feels like very I don't want to be insulting, but it feels very tenuous and mystical in some way, shapes, or form. When you have something like performance marketing that has lots of numbers and stats, and there's a clear, when we do X, we get Y out, and you can kind of, you're always optimizing for results. It's a lot of measurements. Is that kind of the same for brand marketing? And if not, how do you measure success in brand marketing?
You just kind of touched on the debate of the hour, haven't you? Look, I think there is a place for performance marketing. There is a lot to unpack there around performance marketing being more look at me trying to be diplomatic. This is stretching me, and it's.
I can see you are holding back, and I really appreciate
it. Yeah. Performance marketing is good in terms of driving upper funnel and short-term results. What performance marketing by itself does not give you is consumer loyalty, right? It doesn't entrench a brand. And so now there's a couple of things to think about as you think about measurements and success here. The one is typically that entrenched users use more than, less entrenched and upper funnel users. Second is that it is much cheaper to retain than it is to acquire a user. And so your business case starts changing in the, there's a reason to have entrenched users, which you develop through brand building. In terms of how you measure it, welcome back to, the brand funnel, the value proposition, and brand attributes, because that is really the proxy measures that you use to get a sense of your positioning strength and loyalty in the brand more broadly. I am going to leave it there because I will keep you busy for an hour on this topic.
Oh, one day I think I'm going to get you in a room with a performance marketer and just throw a question out and run away and just see what happens. But
Tyson Paul 2.0. Here we go.
So in this case, is brand marketing Tyson, or is I would, older, slower, but effective? There we go.
Okay. We're going to move on.
Yes. I'm going to get both of us in trouble if I keep going. So then let's just focus in on brand marketing and not pull in any other people into the conversation. The idea then is that it might take a little bit longer to show that what you're doing has an impact. Is that kind of true when it comes to brand marketing? Because I kind of feel like I have to compare it to something like performance. It's easier to show that what you're doing is creating a return. But with brand marketing, does that take a few years to say, hey, the work we've done has created that loyalty? Because you can't get loyalty in a day. Is that fair to say?
I think that is very fair to say. I will say, though, that, and we're wrapping up a campaign at the moment that I think emphasizes this for me a little bit. There's nothing to say that brand building communication and consumer-facing activations more broadly can't also have a direct business result. It is around understanding, exactly what the behavior is that you're trying to drive and how that can live within a brand building environment as well. So thinking about brand building as just warm and fuzzy and pretty pictures is wrong, right? There is still a very clear business and strategic purpose to it. It is not just keeping the marketing team busy. No, definitely not that.
So it is the kind of thing where a a board member or a CMO can expect to see some sort of results from the activities that the brand team would be doing, because, like you're saying, there's impact. There's a definite impact that is measurable and at least visible, that you can report on. That does kind of change my opinion of brand marketing a little bit. Not that I didn't have a negative opinion about brand marketing. It's just, in my mind, brand marketing was kind of always slow and long term, and other forms of marketing was like really quick fire. It didn't build for the long term, and you were always kind of chasing your tail. Whereas brand marketing was kind of more thoughtful, and the tortoise and the hare kind of analogy between the two. But
I mean, I see your tortoise and hare analogy. I raise you a weight loss analogy here, right? Like, think about going on a long-term weight loss regime. So you are making healthy choices daily. Over time, that obviously builds up, and hopefully you see significant results. But that doesn't mean that when you get on the scale after week 1, you're not going to see some results. I think that works geniusly as an analogy, by the way.
That is a great... I was about to say that. That is a mind-redefining analogy. The only issue with my analogy is that I will never try to lose weight, so I can't really connect there. But I get the point that
I too, never met her, but in principle, at least.
But hypothetically, it does work. I like the idea of its everyday activities building on for the long term goal, but you are seeing results from the everyday activities as well. That is okay. So I'm going to use that as the understanding of how brand marketing works in the larger marketing strategy.
Gonna hit you with consistently fresh or freshly consistent right now as well. Maybe just make sure I get the two in the right order here. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that marketers can be guilty of just chasing the shiny new thing as soon as they can, so they get bored a lot faster than consumers or users do. This idea of consistency, and building over time means that you want to be consistently fresh. No, I tell you a lie. Freshly consistent. This is the one. See, I always swap them around, which might be a problem for a brand builder. Which means that you want to be true to your positioning. You want to be consistent in how you bring that to life, but the way that you bring it to life needs to be new and engaging. The message needs to be the same. The other way around is consistently fresh is just doing new things all the time. Right, and so you are starting from zero every single time. That is not ideal.
And you're never adding bricks to the building. You're just starting a new building every single time with a new brick, and that just we're just throwing analogies out all day.
Analogy creation factory from now on, I think. But yes, exactly.
You see, yes, and now we're doing the marketing thing of trying to. This is a new fun thing. We could just do analogies all day, and that'll be a fun thing to do. So, I mean, that's how literally this podcast started, was me trying to find the new interesting and fun thing to do for myself. So I totally understand where that brain works. I don't want to keep you forever, because I know that you have work to do and you have a holiday to look forward to that you're building towards. I am super interested about your history with Black Label, and particularly the Carling Cup. It's something you mentioned earlier, that you were involved with the very first Carling Cup, which, if you aren't in the sporting world, it's the FA, not the FA Cup, it's the League Cup of South African football, South African soccer. It's the local soccer teams vying for this now prestigious cup. What was that like? What was what kind of surprised you when you were involved with the marketing of a major sporting competition?
It didn't start out as a major sporting competition, is maybe the thing to call out here, right? So it started with, and maybe that's the biggest and most, I can't call it profound because it's also profoundly obvious, but the thing to call out here is the power of a good consumer insight. And so this was really around putting the power back into consumers' hands. Right? Like, think about every sporting game that you've ever watched, right? Like, the amount of armchair coaches and people with opinions is as many people as, is sitting around you. And so this was around, fine. then you be the coach. Right? If you think you can be the coach, then be the coach. And so it was around getting consumers to do the video game version or live action version of a video game and pick their own team. And that was a world first, with immense results. So I think the biggest aha for me was the power of the insight and just how much engagement that drove more broadly to our users. The other, again, obvious thing I think is just the attention to detail required to make something like this work, right? Like throughout, not just the event, but the activations around it and the communication and the packaging and everything that kind of like built up to make this one big campaign. And I think, more than 10 years later, we see that it is a campaign that's had longevity. And to our point of not getting distracted by shiny new, that's an excellent example of, the core of this thing remains the same, and it's really just around the articulation that changes and gets refreshed.
So from that, it's something that is quite interesting because there's been this group that's kind of been within our conversation the entire time, but we've spoken about a lot of the brand marketing from the perspective of the business that you're working in or that you're working for. What does the business need to do? What do the people within the business feel is important? But with that, the real strong focus is, what is the audience looking for? And the thinking of the audience, the empathy part of how to work with or not with AI, that was very crucial there, right? Like having to understand the audience. So was there a lot of research involved? How does that particular, because that doesn't feel like something that would come out of research. Like if you did, if you sat with 1,000 people within your customer, your target segment, no one would say, do you know what I would love is a chance to choose my team for a football cup final. That's not something that would maybe come out of that. How does that idea come from having empathy for your audience?
You spoke about Ford earlier. You know that Henry Ford quote around, if I asked users what they wanted, they'd say faster horses, right? I think there is a place for qual and quant research. I also think there is a very important and somewhat overlooked place for consumer immersion. Because spending time with your consumers, right, is where this really starts planting the seeds. And then it is a high-powered ideation where, you just kind of like step back and suddenly this thing snaps into alignment. But spending time, in this instance, in a tavern with users, understanding that this is where, they sit, or consumers sit and they watch sport and, their opinions about that and how that becomes a real social binder for them, understanding a little bit more around that sport moment rather than just, the qual and the quant, which is going to tell you that sport is an important part of their lives, is really where you start getting the nuggets for ideas like this.
Wow. Okay. So that is, again, I feel like that's the kind of thing that I see missing a lot with specifically digital marketing, because we're so kind of physically removed often from our customers and from our audience. Spending time just with them seems equally great and crazy to me. Like that seems like such a scary thing to do, and yet, like you're saying, how do you really understand what they're talking about? How are they interacting with not just your product but people around the product? That just requires immersion. That word you said, immersion, feels like such a good word. Just the last question before I release you to have a brain calm down session. If you could give one piece of advice to Imke 15 years ago, just before she started on this journey, would you advise her to get into brand marketing, or would you recommend another path? That smile says a lot.
No, hopefully positive things. I have chosen marketing multiple times in my career, right? I keep on coming back to this thing. It is a discipline that I love deeply, because it is constantly evolving and constantly challenging me in new ways. And it has such a broad intersect of different disciplines as well that is just something that is, in this case, very accurately, consistently fresh. But no, it is, yes, I would absolutely have chosen it again. That's the short answer.
A big thank you to Imke for her time and experience and knowledge that she brought to this episode, and a big thank you to you for listening. We mentioned the Google's Careers website in this episode. You can find the link to that in the show notes. And of course, you'll also find a link to Imke's LinkedIn profile there as well. Give her a follow to get some more great insights. If you are listening on Spotify, please leave a comment in the app and I'll respond to you there. Otherwise, you can send your thoughts, opinions, and questions to podcast@tmdigital.co.za. And of course, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen. Thanks so much. This was the South African Digital Marketing Podcast.